There were all these parts of my body that I had ignored for so long that were now calling for my attention because I was listening, because I was actually listening.
Yeah.
And it felt like, oh, but my strength is my brain. So how could I think my way through this?
For those of us who had difficult births, it's a very different story. My guess is that there's still some residue, even at an emotional and a physical level, of when you have a difficult birth, it's difficult to reclaim your own body, the agency of your own body.
I haven't made a ton of space or been as available for that with grieving about the birth in particular.
If I push down the grieving, that takes me away from my presence in my life. Well, hello, both of you. Well, hello both of you.
This is a treat.
This is a treat for us. We have Abby with us, who's part of our production team. She's been on the show with us. She's the one who's behind the scenes when we record. And Abby has been a dear friend and works with me very closely, and now works very closely with both of us. And so we got really excited because it's such a conversation that you've been having kind of in the back end with us. And so here you are. I would love to share with you what's been on your mind, what's been lighting you up when you listen to these shows in the back end. So come on in.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It is such an honor already to get to be a fly on the wall in the recordings. That's how I feel. I'm typing away, taking notes and noticing, all the gorgeous wisdom that gets woven into all of the conversations you've had with each other, with your guests. So it feels really such an honor to be now on the podcast with you.
Yeah, I love that.
And thank you, Katie.
And one of the things that we noticed early on is that if we were doing well, we could always see it in Abby's face. So when we would end the podcast, we'd come back and sometimes Abby would be crying and we'd go, oh man, we really landed it.
It was a good show.
Good job. So what I was appreciating out of that is your permeability, Abby, to let the information come in and affect you and affect how you are creating and helping to create the back end. And you're so much more than a touchstone. It feel like you're our invisible partner back there. And so I'm really happy to have you come forward so people can see you and experience you directly.
And thank you. I love
that. And some of what I love too is when we finish the show, we'll come to you and you'll be like, oh my God, this part was so exciting. Or I was really lit up by this. And so I'm curious, like it's been now many episodes, like what stays with you? What is alive?
Oh my gosh, so many things. Two things happen when I'm listening. Many things happen when I'm listening, but the things are like, oh wow, I'm learning so much as I am part of the background of it. Not only in what is expanding for me, but also the parts of me that contract when I listen. And I think that part is particularly interesting for me because I do a lot of personal development work and focusing on my own body wisdom and rebuilding this relationship with my body, especially, in a transition, becoming a mother. It felt like I shed a whole part of myself that I wasn't really prepared to let go of. But I notice in those contractions, those are the moments that I get to examine a little bit further and bring in more curiosity. And I think the biggest takeaway for me from this whole year of podcasting with you both has been, how can I bring in more curiosity? Because that seems to seed everything else, the being, the playing, and the loving. It all for me is starting with the curiosity, the breath. I'm a breathwork facilitator when I'm not doing this. So how often the breath gets brought up as this pathway into our body just resonates so deeply with me. I really, really value that. And I think the contraction that is the highest charge for me, if I can be transparent about it, is my relationship to my body and how I love my body or don't love my body on days. So I'm curious to kind of explore that more with both of you.
Oh yeah, that's so valuable. And I was really resonating to what you were saying about with motherhood you shed. And I could see there was a whole tunnel there. It was like a slide down into a whole bunch of experiences
Yeah.
that when you become a mother, there's no way to ignore what happens to your body in that, and how much of it is really out of your control and unpredictable, and not at all what other people told you was going to happen. And then, and then it's not just having the baby, it's what happens to you after the baby. And so, I'm curious
Mm.
about kind of what's up from that you're currently experiencing.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I noticed that before having a baby, I was really valued for my brain. That was really like my high value offer. And so it was easy for me to disconnect from my body. And also, as a child, being in a female body was not a safe place for me to be. And so being able to just, elevate and focus only on my brain felt like, okay, that's my power move.
Hmm.
And then in becoming a mother, my body is being used to feed another being, to grow another being. And I was like, dang, I guess I gotta reignite this conversation with you, body. How have you been? And it was dark. It felt really dark.
Yeah.
I remember reading an article, yeah, from this woman, Dr. Schwartz, and she was talking about a healing crisis. And as we, enter into this healing uh journey, we also enter kind of a crisis mode because we become aware and things become alert. And there were all these parts of my body that I had ignored for so long that were now calling for my attention because I was listening, because I was actually listening.
Yeah.
And it felt like, oh, but my strength is my brain. So how could I think my way through this? And how could I research my way through this? Um, and so I noticed that that's where I'm at now is I feel like I've made, like 70% progress of rebuilding this connection to my body, especially through the breath work and reigniting that conversation in a loving way. And then still that old voice creeps in of like, oh, but I don't love that part. Oh, I wish I didn't do that. Why did I eat that today? And those shaming, and just like noticing the sadness, even on one side of my heart as I offer those statements.
Mm.
Like, oh, just be nicer. Just be nicer.
It's I think that anybody, particularly women listening, are resonating with the what you were just expressing. That's such a conversation that I think is ignited by how society wants us to view ourselves, which is basically from the outside, not from how am I experiencing this? What is my body wanting? What are the messages? Is really like, how do I look? And how are other people going to receive me? And am I going to be rejected in all of those conversations? But the big thing that was emerging for me from what you were saying is that it sounds as though you don't yet feel really safe in your body, and
Mm.
that it's safe to be in your body. And that sounds like that goes way back to some early experiences, which I'm guessing a lot of us also resonate with,
And
that we really learned early on that female bodies don't actually belong to us, like they belong to other people, and we have to kind of make our bodies presentable so that we'll be accepted, the rest of us will be accepted. And that so many of us escape up into, well, if I'm smart, I'll have something I can rely on because my body doesn't feel safe.
yeah. Yeah. And I didn't trust my body. There was a lot of that, especially through childbirth, because it wasn't an easy childbirth and it wasn't even easy getting pregnant. And so there was like just further evidence that, okay, not safe to be in this body. This isn't a good one.
Yeah, I want to send this one back to the factory. It's like, hey.
Just I was just interested in how I was kind of listening to what I was hearing inside of me as you guys were talking. And there was also, but we make babies. There was this sense of like, oh my God, my body, without me needing I mean, yes, we need to do some of it to make it happen. But at some point, my body made eyes and little fingers and heart beatings. And And so I was at the same time, I was kind of like experiencing the yes, we get taken over a little bit, and we feeling out of control. There's some of this language, but there's also wow, like my being was able to build another being. That's like I mean, as women, we're the only one who can do that. I mean, the
Mhm.
feminine creatures, the only
Mhm.
ones who can do that. And there's still to this day, without everything that's advanced and the science and everything they've been able to do so far, there is so being in a woman's body, it's interesting. Like, do we think there's I took it a little bit to like, if it wasn't for women, they wouldn't be people,
Yeah.
which is a basic, yeah, so kind of a cliche to think of it that way. But do we think there is a little bit of the masculine has hatred towards the mother, that it gets
Mhm.
translated in this,
Mhm.
treating women as not, I mean, I guess some men respect their mothers a lot, but I wonder if there's something there. You were shaking your head, Kitty. I'm curious too.
Well, I was also noticing you really nodding to that. So I'm really interested in how that landed for you. And then, I'll add in, because I have lots to share. And the experience of being able to give birth can be wonderful. I've experienced women who just pop out babies and, then, back to the rest of their life and da-da-da-da. But for those of us who had difficult births, it's a
Mm.
very different story. And
Hmm.
so my guess is that there's still some residue, even at an emotional and a physical level, of when you have a difficult birth, it's difficult to reclaim your own body, the agency of your own body.
Mhm. Yeah, I think even so many things popped in that. The reclamation of my own body, I think what it felt like for me was like I was just being born into a new body
Mm.
because um cellularly I've changed. I've changed. There's no getting back to who I was before. She's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the
Oh,
grief that
yeah.
was there because I
I just
didn't get
felt
to
that.
say goodbye to her.
Yeah.
Uh and so that was a piece. And also, so if I just really want to acknowledge the honor and the oh, it just felt like really the responsibility. I don't know if that's the right word, but just, yeah, I think the honor and the weight of getting to create life that maybe because it's an everyday occurrence, that the magic of that gets taken away through that. Like I should just be able to have a baby, but I couldn't just have a baby. It took years for us to be able to have a baby. And so in that, just in
Mm.
that process felt like, man, here I am failing again at being a
Hmm.
woman's body. And so then when I got my daughter, oh, when she arrived, and it didn't feel the way they told me in the books, it would feel, I was like, again, another checkbox of, list of reasons why I have not delivered, pun intended,
Mm.
on being in a woman's body the way I'm supposed to. And I didn't get back to my body the way I was supposed to. And so there's been a whole dialogue with
Mm.
myself, dialogue because it is two-way with my body, um, of how we now get to be in this new self and how we love each other in this new self.
Mm.
Yeah.
And also, I hear when you've lost something, when I've lost something, the grief may be there for a while, a long time, and every time it comes up, it can feel as sharp
Mhm.
as the first moment. And so I wanted to just encourage you and anybody who's listening to this who resonates that how important it is to honor the grief
Mhm.
and to just ride I've found that riding the wave,
Yeah.
that is letting myself just really feel it and maybe turning it into some kind of creative expression, writing about it or singing or drawing something that allows you to turn it into something creative for
Mhm.
you, allows you to then utilize the energy of the grief. I found that after grieving it literally does open up more space for getting into the current moment and creating now, like what's here now. But
Mm.
the other thing that was occurring to me is that our modern way of birthing has been primarily taken over by men, and by being in a hospital setting for thousands of years. This was a woman's domain, and all of the knowledge that women had about where you are and what's occurring in the birth process, and being there and celebrating, and being with what you need. That's been taken over by really the mechanisms of this is how we should do it, and the contractions are here now, so we're going to move you in here, and I think for me that was part of the grief also of because I had really what I called a Monty Python birth. If you look at the meaning of life in Monty Python, that was my birth experience. It was like it was comical, except it was me. And so letting yourself really have the experience of letting that unwind, and it's going to take however long it takes.
Yeah.
And I find that the more I can ride that wave, then the more I can come current again. But if I try to push it away, it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, as you said that, I was really curious to, since we're talking about grieving, there's of course the situations where the baby is not born, or the relationship doesn't work with the partner, and there's even more opportunities that sometimes people have to grieve. I'm curious, Katie, like how does one grieve? Like
Mhm.
what does that look like?
Oh, that's such a great question. Well, for me, it is recognizing the sensation of grieving, which the body sensations, which I think for each of us is its own gestalt. For me, it was this almost being like pulled down
Mm.
underwater,
Mm.
and a sense of swirling and heaviness, and feeling tears arise, back behind, but more of a swirly sensation. And so I invite anybody who is really wondering, am I grieving? Your head will go, am I grieving? But your body will have very specific sensations that will let you know. And I find as I give attention to them, that's what starts if there's something that's wanting to move through, and your experience with breathing, that when I give attention to the sensations, then it activates the breathing that I'm wanting, maybe taking bigger breaths. Also, tears might come, but it may not be tears. It may be a moving that's wanting to come, a rocking, or some kind of. I think the rhythm of grieving has that sort of rocking motion. It may be forward, backward, or side, but to tune into your sensations, and then how does that want to move and breathe in and through you? And my sense is it's a wave. So for
Yeah.
me, it's a swirl and then a wave. And if I participate with it, it moves through me.
Wow.
Are you imagining? So I'm imagining someone listening and being like, all right. So I'd like to grieve. There's
I'd
something
like to breathe now, please.
I would like to grieve. Is it something you allow to come when it comes, and you attempt to catch it and give it space, or is it something you can, like, do you lit up a candle maybe and spend the
Mhm.
evening trying to kind of like
Uh,
elicit?
I don't recommend that.
Yeah.
So to me, that's kind of like picking at a scab.
Okay.
But if grieving, there's so much loss going on all the time.
Hmm.
Big losses and little losses, and losing. Like with my most recent losing our cat Lucy, even many years ago, I would see something on the television, and boom, there would be this, it would trigger something. And
Hmm.
so I never knew when that grief was going to want to come through.
Hmm.
And I think all the just being available. So the way that you are with your daughter, that availability, like
Hmm.
you're always tuned in, and so you can hear and feel the things that are emerging. You can give that to yourself,
Yeah.
of that same kind of just being with, and like noticing the currents.
Mm.
And I think that welcoming of like whenever I'm here, whenever that wants to come through, I'm here with you. I think that to me is the most friendly way of being with grief.
Mm. I
Mm.
love the question too of how does this want to move through me?
Mhm.
And going back to that curiosity, because I noticed for myself when I was in grief, I didn't know that that's what was happening. And
Right.
my logical mind wanted to, research my way through it
Yeah.
and just, and even I could, like, maybe on a very surface level, understand, oh, this is grief. I'll cry. I'll be okay. That's moving through it. That's enough.
Right.
Yeah. But
Done.
as you were, yeah, exactly. Like I scheduled my block of time for grieving.
Right. Okay. Now,
Perfect. Now on my
French
next
toast. Right.
yeah. Yeah. And as you were speaking of grief, what I was really feeling was like this energy at the back of my eyes, at the back of
Yes.
my body, and wanting to like curl in and be
Beautiful.
a wave, like the contraction and expansion, contraction to let my body ride it like that was like, oh yeah, I haven't made a ton of space or been as available for that with grieving about the birth in particular and
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that you're tuning into it. It's really like the door, the doorway.
Mm.
And when you get that sense from your sensations, when you experience that, then you can start participating. And then if it wants to be a big wave or a little wave,
Yeah.
I found that it truly does move through you and leaves behind more open space.
Yeah.
And so with grieving, one of the things that people say and that I've experienced is that that is my presence, gets bigger and bigger than the grief. And then the episode of the grief gets held in larger space, in more love, in more, yes, I know you're here. And there's breath, and there's connection with others, and there's love here. And so there's a sensation, there's a message that we get that it should go away.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we finished that now. You've had your 6 weeks of grieving and now back to work. Or, however,
Mm.
our mind tries to control these very, very deep rhythms in us. And as you open up to your own timing, my experience is that I'm able to be more present in the rest of my life.
Mm.
And that if I push down the grieving, that takes me away from my presence in my life.
Well, I'm hearing too, sorry, so just as you're talking about the opening up to the grief, to the moving through it, it sounds like for me when they talk about the stages of grief, there can be this paradigm or belief, false belief maybe that if I don't follow these stages, I must not be doing
Which
it
were all made
right.
up, by the way.
Yeah.
By someone
Yeah.
who, by the way, as she was about to die, was like, F all this. This is not how it's working at all. And it turns out
Yeah,
it's a dream.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh
So
my
one of the
goodness.
things that as you were saying that, I was also hearing that um, part of grieving is just the ranting.
Yeah.
The this just cannot be happening. I just, I don't accept this. And so I think, ranting around. I like to do that outside. You can do it like in a pool. You can yell in the pool. You can crash things. You could tear up newspaper and throw them around. So letting that come through too, so that grieving is not just, I put something over my head and I'm so that energy of the anger, which I think, may also come up at any time.
Yeah.
And if you don't honor that, it then come out sideways,
Yeah.
and with your connections with people in your life in the present day.
Have you
Mhm.
also, though, found people sometimes get, like, I know people that are kind of grieving as a full-time job. Like, they're kind of
Mhm.
stuck in that. Like, what's the line? How does one know? Okay, because I hear the joking around, like, okay, I'm done with my grieving, moving
Yeah.
on. But there's a time where maybe there isn't. I find that some people kind of live there.
Yes, that's such a great, yeah, such a great noticing that. So the emergence, when something emerges and you follow that authentically, and then it moves through. And I've never seen anything take longer than 20 minutes. No, even, people who've had horrible experiences, if they really enter into it. But there's a way, and I can hear it, and I think you can hear it. And the job is for the person who's doing it to be able to hear that it has that, there's a grating sound that it's not authentic. You're
Yes.
kind of now indulging it. When someone's crying and then you're like, we see this with kids when they get this
It
attention.
seems like
Like,
it's getting me something. I'm gonna cry a little
oh, I'm gonna
longer.
cry some more because it was so horrible. And then looking to see did I get it? How'd that work? So the
Uh,
if you find yourself, there's a sense of repeating, and also if you're willing to get feedback from others, like, that sounds like there's something else going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So grieving, if you're in that, there's probably something else, some request, or something that you're not willing to then move into, something to look at or to resolve. So
Yeah.
that's a great point that you brought up. So
I'm
if you
curious as well about, being that addicted to suffering and this unwillingness to let go. And if I, what happens if I move through the grief, but then the person, thing, experience, story I've lost disappears forever? And maybe that's an unwillingness to let it
ah,
be as it is.
uh-huh. Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah. And so what did you have?
Well, I was just remembering, I was watching this little video. Just sometimes they pop in your Instagram or whatever, and there's this little boy who comes to the father and he goes, "Can I have some ice cream?" And the dad is like, no, it's like almost time to go to bed. And so the kid walks away and he's like, "All right, I need to be more," he's like 5 years old. "I need to be more strategic." And he comes back and he goes, "Dad, I've had such a long day. I'm thinking, what if we shared ice cream and told about our day so we can have a moment together?" And the dad is like, "Yes," and goes and gets the ice cream. And the kid was like, "Yes, that worked." I was just like,
Yeah, so our strategies that we learn,
yes,
how to,
how
how
to
to get.
actually get what we want. That's really
So interesting.
the other thing, to bounce back to the birth, the story of the birth thing that was striking me while you guys were talking too, is having been very heavy. I was 300 pounds when I got pregnant, and 280 because I gained 60 or 70 pounds when I was pregnant. And so, but I remember loving it because it was okay to be large. It was almost like being fat was no longer, of course, I'm having a baby. Like like it went from something that felt very pathological or diseased somehow to something that people are very touched by pregnant. I mean, not everyone, but for the most part, people are very empathetic and kind, and
Celebrating.
thanks
Yeah.
very, very much. And people were very vulnerable and very kind. And I remember it was probably the beginning. It's after that that I really started healing the deepest of this whole. So I'm curious, Abby, as you
Mm.
were, because when you said I'm no longer the person I was before, which is true because now you're a mother, or there's something more to your life. I'm curious to, like, in relationship to your body, like, did you experience the marvel of doing what you were doing before it became a little more complicated? Like, was there a moment around that?
Oh yeah. For much of my pregnancy, it felt very uh like I was this magical being that, as you said, was, knew how to put cells together to make
Mhm.
eyes and ears and toes and a nose. And especially, I saw on one of our ultrasounds the profile of her face, and I could see, I have chills now. I could see already who she was gonna be. I could see her. And that felt like, wow, our bodies can do this. It felt really incredible. And there were also just moments tinged with, I was a bit older when I got pregnant. And so I was a geriatric pregnancy. And, there was additional tests that were required and additional warnings and
Uh,
all of this stuff of feeling like, that felt almost like it was pulling away from the magic of it by hearing those
Mhm.
inputs. And now I feel much more connected to my spirituality, to nature than I ever did before becoming a mother. And so if I were to have another baby, I would do it differently. But at the time, I
Mhm.
really wanted to be like, I wanted to be in the hospital because my mother had had complications and I knew that I had a risk of complications. And so I kind of chose for a sterile environment that if I knew what I know now then, I wouldn't choose that again. I wouldn't choose that again myself because I know that so much of me was resisting that subconsciously.
Mhm.
But to answer your questions, if I really did feel the honor of getting to grow this being as well, and actually, probably you're right, being pregnant was the most I've ever loved my body.
Mhm.
And then that conversation changed. And now I feel like I'm working my way back. But as I said, I feel like I'm 70% of the way.
Mhm.
Then these moments come in where I don't trust my body to hold that safety. I don't feel safe in it necessarily. Um, I see the external pressures from society of looking a certain way and being a successful mother, what being a successful mother looks like. So I'm aware of that. And also aware of my tendency to get into my brain when it feels like I'm not ready to have the conversation.
Mhm. Yeah, I can hear a lot of feelings swirling around the whole um th- that all of us experience this what I call exogenous world caused from without, that the world says, okay, now, okay, 6 weeks now, time for you to look this way and pop back into, all of
Mhm.
the rhythms of, oh, I'm a mother and I'm also doing this and I'm, and I have my own career and then it's all fine.
Just juggle all of these things.
Yeah,
We
I'm
both,
just
for
juggling
those of you who are not looking at us right now, the three of us started juggling
at the same time.
simultaneously.
Yeah, so we understand that, and there's a sense that I have that there's something in there that like it's in a basket that you haven't opened up yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel that. I loved what you said too about grief, using that as inviting an expression through art, through writing, through painting. And so I really feel called to explore that
Yeah.
after this. So thank you for that invitation,
Sure,
Katie.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I no, and I just want to, not like this is going to happen to you, but for those of us, like I had a very traumatic childbirth experience, and it changed my body forever.
Mhm.
And getting into harmony with that took a long time. And but lots of like, what does my body want now? And how is that changing the way that I want to move through the world? Changes everything
Mm.
when you let your body tell you, and now what? What do you want now? What do you need now? And letting that be part of really your daily conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
The thing that struck me as I don't know why we ended up talking so much about the birth and the grief now, but I remember doing a labyrinth walk with a friend of mine whose father had died on a Monday, and she delivered her baby on the Wednesday.
Mm,
And on the Friday, when she left the hospital, that was the first thing she wanted to do was to do this walk because it was a very grounding experience for her. But I remember the metaphor, and then maybe that's why these thoughts are being integrated right now of birth and grief. And but I remember she walked in the labyrinth saying goodbye to her father,
yeah.
and she walked out of the labyrinth metaphorically saying hello to her
Oh,
child, right?
oh,
And
that's beautiful.
that was very beautiful, and there was a lot of tears, and there was a but she recently the kid is now I think 20 or something, 19, so that was a long time ago. She's been a long time friend of mine, but I remember recently she said to me that that is what gave her. So maybe there are moments that are metaphorical like this that one can create or initiate that was very ritualistic,
Mhm.
very deliberate. And she spoke to it being the moment where she was able to truly grieve the father leaving, her becoming the new body, the mother, the thing. It was just, I just wanted to pitch it in as it sometimes having a chosen, you described it as, scabbing a little bit earlier and picking at the scab sometimes. And I'm wondering if also deliberately inviting maybe your women, your tribe, to do something and dance to something that would anchor this moment of like, okay, now
Yeah.
this is.
some kind of a ritual. But what I'm hearing for your friend is that that impulse came to her.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm saying is that I think
Yes.
that there's absolutely, that in the old days, we would have that because the women would all be there and they,
Yes.
and they would create spontaneous rituals and welcoming and caring for and,
And
and
singing and then
yes,
tribal.
yes, and the sense of, look at what you've done, and here we have a new being and welcoming into the community, and we have so much of that. We're isolated from so much of that now with
Yeah.
our, with our own separate houses and our own separate societies, and so your own chosen, friends and the people who are supporting you, you could invent something with them, as part of your continued journey with this.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, as we're wrapping up, I want to make sure, Abby, this was an unexpected conversation. Like I love how we
Yes.
start these always,
Yes, we
not knowing
did.
where we're
Yep.
going. But is it interesting to you, like where
Yeah.
that all went?
Oh my gosh, of course. Yeah, the concept of using grief to open up energy, because I think there is this belief that grief is down, it's dark, it's gloomy, hide it in the corner. I'm going to just process it by myself, and to have a way to just open it and expand it through these different avenues. I love, and I love that this conversation is nonlinear, just like grief. And
Just like life.
it's like life.
Ah,
It's
oh, thank
really
you both. This was
Thank
so
you.
beautiful. More to
Oh,
come.